All right, so picture this. Jesus has just fed thousands of people with a few loaves and fish, an incredible miracle. Now he wants some time alone. But for his disciples, a terrifying night on the Sea of Galilee is just about to kick off. A night of wind and waves that's going to end with a mind-blowing revelation about who Jesus really is. Okay, let's get right into it.
So, our story kicks off in Matthew 14, verse 22, right after that amazing feeding of the 5,000. Now, the scripture says Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship. I mean, that's a really strong word, right? Constrained. It tells you he was being pretty forceful about it. He's deliberately sending them on ahead while he takes care of sending the crowds home.
And then, what does he do? Verse 23 tells us he goes up on a mountain by himself to pray. And you've got to see the contrast here. It's so powerful. Jesus is up there, totally at peace, in communion with the Father. Meanwhile, his disciples, well, they have absolutely no idea what they're sailing into.
So, while Jesus is praying, things are getting, well, pretty serious for the disciples out on the water. They are completely alone, it's pitch black, and the sea is starting to turn on them. And verse 24 really paints a picture of just how bad it was getting.
You have to understand, the Sea of Galilee is notorious for this stuff. It's not just some placid little lake. It's surrounded by these hills that act like a wind tunnel, and storms can just explode out of nowhere. So what they're dealing with isn't just a bit of rough water. No way. This is a full-blown, life-threatening storm. And remember, a lot of these guys were seasoned fishermen. They knew danger when they saw it.
And then, verse 25 gives us this really important detail. The time. It's the fourth watch of the night. So we're talking somewhere between 3 and 6 in the morning. Think about that. It's the absolute darkest, coldest part of the night. These guys have been wrestling with the storm for hours. They must have been beyond exhausted, just completely spent, and probably thinking this was the end. So, right at this moment, when they're at their absolute breaking point, totally exhausted and terrified, something appears. Something that just doesn't make any sense. They see a figure walking on the water, on the raging waves. And what's their first thought? Is it, oh good, someone's here to help us? No. Verse 26 says they thought it was a ghost, a spirit. So imagine that. You're already terrified of drowning, and now you think you're seeing something from the supernatural world. The fear level just went through the roof. But then, right away, Jesus cuts through all that terror with his voice. And his words in verse 27 are like this perfect 3-step rescue. First, he's like, take heart. Then he tells them who he is. It is I. And finally, he gives them a command. Don't be afraid. It's brilliant. He deals with their spiritual fear before he even touches the physical storm. Okay, to really get why this was so mind-blowing, you've got to think about the Old Testament. The disciples, they grew up on these stories. Moses parting the Red Sea, right? Joshua stopping the Jordan River. But see, all those amazing miracles were about controlling the water, parting it, stopping it. Nobody ever walked on top of it. That was a whole different level. And this right here, this is the absolute key. There's a phrase in the book of Job that says God alone treads on the waves of the sea. So when Jesus does this, he's not just pulling off an incredible stunt. He is making a silent, powerful statement about who he is. He's showing them, not just telling them, that he is the Lord over all creation. So, they hear his voice, they see this impossible thing happening, and of course, one of the disciples just has to take it a step further. And I bet you can guess who. Yep, it's Peter. Good old Peter. In verse 28, he blurts out, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water. I mean, how wild is that request? It's impulsive, for sure, but there's some incredible faith mixed in there too. And Jesus' answer? Just one simple, powerful word. Come. And what happens next is just this perfect, almost textbook example of how faith works. For a second there, Peter is doing it. He's walking on water. Why? Because his eyes are locked on Jesus. But the instant he looks away, the instant he remembers the wind and the giant waves, that's when fear rushes in, and he starts to go down. It's such a quick change, isn't it? He takes his eyes off the one who controls the storm to look at the storm itself, and that's it. He starts to sink. His bold statement of faith from a second ago just turns into this desperate cry in verse 30, Lord, save me. And look at verse 31. Jesus' response is immediate. He doesn't wait. He just reaches out his hand and catches him. But then listen to the question he asks. It's so insightful. He doesn't say, "Why were you scared?" He asks, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" He points straight to the root cause. The problem wasn't the storm, it was the doubt. But believe it or not, Peter walking on water isn't even the main event here. The real climax, the big takeaway, happens right after this, when Jesus and Peter finally get back into the boat. Okay, check this out. Verse 32 says that the moment they climbed into the boat, the wind just stopped. Not died down, not tapered off, it ceased. The sources call it a complete atmospheric stilling. It's like someone just flipped a switch on the entire storm. Total, instant calm. And here's something really cool. Remember that other time Jesus calmed a storm? He had to stand up and shout at it, right? Peace, be still. But this time, he doesn't say a single word. His very presence is enough to silence the chaos. That's a whole other level of authority right there. You see, this whole thing wasn't about getting them from point A to point B. It was a lesson. It was a private demonstration just for his inner circle. And man, did it work. Look at the reaction in verse 33. All the fear is gone. All the shock is gone. It turns into worship. And for the very first time, as a group, they look at him and say it out loud. Truly, you are the Son of God. So, in just a few chaotic minutes, these guys went from being terrified of a storm to being terrified of a ghost to being in total awe. And that awe finally became worship. The crisis became the catalyst for their confession. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How many times in our own lives does it take a storm, a moment of crisis, to finally see things with perfect clarity?